So in this video, I'm just going to talk about some of the basics that we need to understand before we take on this section on probability. The first thing I'm going to talk about is random experiments. Okay. Now, you've probably heard this before, but we just need to define a definition on that. So a random experiment is a course of action whose outcome is not predictable and is such that repeated trials of the action may give different outcomes. So to give you some examples of a random experiment, one might be tossing a coin. So obviously we wouldn't know what the outcome was if the coin was fair. Two, throwing a dice or rolling a dice, whichever one you want to say. So throwing a dice. Or dealing two cards from a deck of cards. Can I just point out there that we have had a few issues in the past of students not knowing about decks of cards. Just to clarify, we have 52 cards in a deck. And of those 52 cards, we have 4 suits, which are hearts, clubs, diamonds, and spades. And obviously the hearts and diamonds there are red, and the clubs and spades are black suits. And then obviously within each suit there are 13 cards that go from ace to 10. Then we have our jack, queen and king. I thought I'd mention that because there seems to be a few people that always get a bit confused with those. Now moving on slightly from random experiments, if we take the idea of how we record data, so for example, once we've done our experiment, there must be a set of all possible outcomes from that experiment, and we call that a sample space. Now some of you may have done sample spaces before when you've recorded rolling 2 dice, but to give you an example of a sample space, when we toss a coin, we should know that when we toss a coin, we get 2 outcomes, heads or tails, yeah? So I'm going to use H or T for heads or tails. Now, if I was going to write that in a sample space using probability language, we'd write S for sample space equals, and then we use these extended brackets, and we write inside our sample space all the possible outcomes. So that would be the sample space for tossing a coin. If I was going to say rolling a dice, then my sample space would look like this. It would be RS, our extended brackets, and then we'd list all the possible outcomes. Obviously, we'll refine this later, but I think just to get used to the way in which we record information is really important. And then finally, I just want to talk about the term an event. Okay, so within probability, we will be talking quite a lot about events. Okay. So an event is a property associated with the outcomes of a random experiment or a subset of a sample space. Okay, so if I had a card dealt from a pack and its suit was noted, so a card dealt from a pack and the suit was noted, okay, my sample space would look like this. It would be hearts, clubs, diamonds and spades. Now if I wanted to set up an event, now we usually put these in alphabetic order. If I said event A was a red card dealt, then my sample space for A would be hearts or diamonds. Then if I then said that B was black card was dealt, then my sample space would be spades or clubs, and they are subsets of my true sample space. So that covers all the basic principles that you'd need to know for probability.